Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you to the Downtown Residents Council District 14 Candidate Forum. My name is Crispin Lawson. I'm the current chair of the DRC. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the DRC, we're a volunteer group of residents, all living downtown, of course, whose mission is to try to improve the quality of life for residents downtown, build social ties, and also educate people about civic issues. And that's the reason we're here tonight. The Residents Council has a history of hosting forums for council candidates. We've done it the last few elections, and we're happy to be able to do so tonight, even in a virtual forum. We have all three candidates here, the incumbent David Blewett, Paul Ridley, and Elizabeth Viney. And we also have a very esteemed moderator, Vince Pacente, who is well known as a New York Times bestselling author, I think it's 7 times. And he's won awards for his motivational speaking. He's spoken in front of many conferences for many businesses, and we're really fortunate to have him here tonight. And finally, the last thing I want to quickly say is we are having another District 2 forum, which is going to be on April 19th, so that's going to be this coming Monday at the same time, and you can use the same link for it. So we hope to have you back for that one as well. So let me turn it over to Vince.
All right, welcome everyone. To be your moderator is simply an honor and a privilege and new territory for me right now. So we're going to run through this. There's actually some election basics that I'd like to run through, and it's Dallas City Council members serve 2-year terms, and our municipal elections are nonpartisan, so political parties are not part of the ballot. People must have registered to vote by April 1st. That has passed to be eligible to cast a ballot on May 1st, the election day. Early voting is from April 19th to April 27th, and you can vote at any Dallas County voting location during early voting. Remember that valid ID is required to vote. And I'm here to moderate and not endorse candidates. I'm a Canadian. I married a Texas gal, so that's how I ended up here. I will say you're protecting the wrong border. Anyway, so we're here to have some fun and get to know the candidates better, but I do encourage the viewers to get to know the candidates in District 14. So now I'm going to turn it over to the candidates and ask them in order to be able to, sorry about that, in order of alphabetical order from last name. So, Viney, you're always in class, always at the end of the list,
the
probably.
Same every time.
So we're going to start with each candidate and just introduce yourself and why you are running. So, David Blewett, take it away.
Thank you. I appreciate the Residents Council for having us down here tonight. My name is David Blewett. I am the incumbent city councilman for District 14. I am running again because I've spent 20, 30 years in District 14 at all levels, as a single person, as a young married person, as a young family, now as a middle-aged family. And all along the way, I have thought about what a wonderful life we've built, and I try very hard to focus on the next generation. I try and focus on how they're going to have the life that I've had. I try and focus on how the next phase of my life and what that looks like. So as I think about the 3 different generations in District 14 and where I was, where I am, and where I'm headed, I think about the different issues that matter to all of us. And it is public safety, and that's encompassing a lot of different things. What it is for me is it's 911 response times. I also think a lot about housing affordability, which for me is property taxes, and quite frankly, for the next generation to be able to buy a house. It's very important to me. I also think about infrastructure. These are things that I hear about all the time when we think about roads that are in rough condition and bonds that we need to pass to be able to pay for things. And then, of course, the other thing that I focus on a lot, which is really easier of the other items, is quality of life. I put in crosswalks, I focus on parks, I pay attention to trails. I think if we're going to live here, we have to have a high quality of life. It's very important to me. I work very hard at it, and I look forward to doing it for 2 more years.
Great. All right, Mr. Paul Ridley, you're next.
Thank you, Vince. My name is Paul Ridley. I am a former plan commissioner for District 14, have served District 14 on 2 different commissions for a total of 12 years of public service. During that time, I became familiar with the different sections of District 14, including the real jewel of the district, that is downtown, which is really the heart of the entire city. and I worked here for 30 years during my career. It also, of course, includes Uptown, Oak Lawn, and Old East Dallas. And all three of those sections, or four, of the district have one thing in common. They're wonderful places to live. And that's something that I recognized long ago when I first moved to the district 28 years ago. And that's something that is one of my motivations for running for council. After my 12 years of public service, I really became committed to the theme of my campaign, which is making Dallas better. And that's something that I strive to do in my previous commission roles, and it is something that I will do on council. We have wonderful neighborhoods, we have wonderful cultural facilities and public institutions and places of employment. But we have a lot of issues to address. We have a lack of affordable housing. We have a homeless situation. We need to preserve neighborhoods from unwanted or undesirable development. We need to protect our neighborhood parks from being invaded by people that want to commercialize them and overdevelop them. They're a unique asset in our district, both downtown and in all sections of District 14. And that is something that I will work very hard to do, to protect all of the different sections of District 14, to preserve their character and their economic vitality.
Thank you, sir. Elizabeth Vining, you have the floor.
Yes. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Viney. First of all, thank you for having us. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I've been in the district for 14 years, native Louisianian, but as they say, got to Texas as quick as I could. And have been in the district the entire time. Started my time here in the Village Apartments. My husband and I purchased our first home in the M Streets, and now we live in nearly a 100-year-old home in Old East Dallas. And I'm a wife. I'm a mom of 3 children. I'm an attorney. I've been investing in this community for a long time. My time of service for our city began when I was in law school, when I served as a pro bono student attorney and guardian ad litem for children who were suffering from abuse or neglect. I then graduated law school after working for a federal judge for a year, began my legal practice. And in addition to my legal practice, I did a lot of pro bono work relating to justice initiatives. I served our community in all throughout Dallas, but specifically in West Dallas, representing neighbors, neighborhood associations, working with neighborhood leaders and law enforcement to combat crime on their streets and restoring hope and dignity in their neighborhoods and in our community. So I'm here because I'm taking that experience and that knowledge of the importance of public safety. Public safety, your safety, is my #1 priority, and I will work very hard for that. That is my #1 reason for running, to ensure that everyone from the quaint homes in East Dallas to the bustling downtown can live, work, and play in a safe area. I am also, with past real estate investment experience, I am also looking for smart economic development throughout our district. Our district is truly the most vibrant part of Dallas. I may be a little biased as a District 14 resident, but we are the most vibrant part of Dallas. So much development is going on. So I would advocate for smart development that takes into account the nearby neighbors, to be partners with the developers and to help with that development. I would also be supporting small businesses, be seeking to lower your taxes, and improving infrastructure. And finally, I will be the responsive, decisive city council person that this district needs and most certainly deserves. Thank you.
Well done. Well, we're going to go through a rotation here instead of doing the same rotation each time. Paul, I'm going to go to you next, and then Elizabeth, you'll be next, and then Mr. Blewett as well. So the first question I have for you is, what's the biggest challenge the city of Dallas and your district is facing, and why are you the best candidate in the district to find a solution?
Vince, I would say that the biggest challenge is affordable housing. we have wonderful neighborhoods, but they are fast rising in property value. And that's creating, first of all, unattainable housing for many people who have lived in the district for years, sometimes decades. They're getting priced out of their own neighborhoods. And that's something that the city recognized in its comprehensive housing policy, that we are 20,000 units short citywide of affordable housing. Our district is the ideal district for affordable housing. We have a certain number of affordable units that tend to be older multifamily and some single-family neighborhoods that need to be protected from overdevelopment. But it's an ideal location for the location of new mixed-income housing in areas of high opportunity, which are throughout our district. Areas that are near retail, shopping centers that have grocery stores with healthy food, near educational institutions, near places of employment, near mass transportation, so that we're not relegating people at the lower income strata to the far reaches of the city and pushing them further and further away from developed areas of downtown. That is neither fair nor equitable. And so that is something that I have a history in recognizing on the Plan Commission 6 years ago when I first advocated the adoption of inclusionary zoning, which is a process by which developers who are seeking increased density in their multifamily housing projects are asked to give something back to the city in exchange for the right to develop additional units. And that ask is that they provide a certain percentage of their new units to be rented at a percentage of median family income, which means that they are affordable for the workers in our society, our teachers, our firemen, our policemen, our public servants in general. And that's something that is really a strong unmet need that we need to address in our district. I'm also very familiar with our current affordable housing programs. I think we need to do more to provide grants and loans for low-income people, particularly our seniors, who are having difficulty staying in their homes because they can no longer maintain them or repair them. So that this would allow them to hire contractors, to allow them to stay and age in place. I think that's an important program that we need to add additional resources to in our city.
Great. Elizabeth?
All right, so the most pressing issue in our city and in our district in particular, right? I would say the most pressing issue, both in our district and in our city, is public safety. We've had 2 years of record high rising crime in our city. 2019, we saw a record murder rate, the highest murder rate in about 10 years, I believe. And then in 2020, we broke that record. We had 253 murders in 2020, the highest number of murders since 1998, is my understanding. And in response to that rising crime rate, which, by the way, the crime rate in 2021 is now outpacing 2020. So I think that is the most important and the most pressing issue we're facing right now. In response to the rising crime rate, the current city council, including the incumbent in this race, voted to take 25% out of our police overtime budget, $7 million out of our police overtime budget. We're currently understaffed on officers. Therefore, we depend on their overtime to respond to our 911 calls. After that overtime vote, we saw an increase in property crime, which we're still feeling. I've spoken with neighbors and residents, including people who live downtown, who tell me part of the reason they moved into downtown was because of the walkability and the urban feel of downtown. However, now some residents no longer feel safe, for example, walking down the street to get food at the commissary. So that's inappropriate, and it's the most pressing issue that we're facing right now. And I think it's an equity issue throughout the city of Dallas. There are more vulnerable neighborhoods than others throughout Dallas, and we need to all be able to live, work, and play in a safe neighborhood. Now, my understanding is that some are now saying that the overall DPD budget was increased a little last year and not decreased. However, any increase that there was due to a pre-existing contracted for pay salary adjustment. that was not within the purview of what city council was dealing with at the time or what they had control over. What they did have control over was the overtime budget, which they proceeded to slash by 25%. I think that decision was inappropriate considering the rising crime, and I would address crime and make it a #1 priority as a city council person.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Blewett.
Well, I agree with a little bit of what Elizabeth just had to say. The #1 issue in District 14 is public safety, but that's an umbrella for what the real issue is. And the real issue is 911 response times. Because when people call 911, they need an officer, they want an officer, and we should be able to deliver an officer. That whole process is more than just a budget item. Although she's right, the budget did go up. I voted for a budget of $501 million in 2019 and $516 million in 2020, and it's not because of contractual obligations, it's because that's what the budget was voted in as. The biggest problem we face in 911 responses is twofold. One is we passed in our budget fully funding the 911 call center for about 100 plus 911 call takers. We have about 70. We have spent a full year trying to staff up. I've been down to the call center. I call in late at night. I identify myself as a councilman. I tell them, what's the hold time? I want to know what's going on because my people are complaining to me about 10-minute hold times, dropped calls, and officers that don't show up. This is very important to me, and I've been very engaged in it. The second part of it is we are light on officers. Now, we had a KPMG study that wouldn't give us a hard number of what the top line should be. It's 3,500, 3,600. We don't really know. And so we are at about 3,100-ish, 3,050-ish. The real issue is our attrition rate is much higher than our replacement rate. During COVID, we took our academy and took it from 50 per class, 4 classes per year. We would have been able to train 200 guys per year, and instead we're training 100 per year. The last training class was about 18. The big challenge we have is there's a whole bunch of people who've chosen not to be police officers right now, and we are competing to get them. I've been pushing the city manager to institute a bonus program. We are now paying a $10,000 bonus to recruit trained officers from other markets to come here. Our pay is commensurate with surrounding areas. I voted for that, I support that. I am doing everything I can to make sure morale is high and attrition is low. If we can do that, and if we can raise our training classes, we can begin to reverse the process we're in right now, which is more officers to respond to your calls when you call 911. I've met with the new chief of police. I've talked to him quite a bit about morale. He is a fireball. Chief Garcia is out there, he is engaged, the morale is up. He has elevated people to his command staff from within the department. You can feel it out there. The guys are engaged. They're responding, they're hungry, and we're winning this battle even though we're understaffed. So we're gonna get there, but it's complex. It's more than a top line, it's more than overtime. It is morale, leadership. It is not criticizing the entire force when one officer does something, which is something I promised 2 years ago I would not do. I've been very supportive of the force in general. Mistakes are made. I won't go down that path. So we're doing everything we can to make sure attrition is low and hiring is high. That will solve our problem on 911 response times.
Thank you. All right. I'd like us to jump back to property taxes because I'm asking for me. It's so frustrating to have your property taxes keep going up, and you just, as an entrepreneur, I think of the opportunity we have in the public sector to run more as a business. So, Ms. Vining, I'm going to start with you in terms of property taxes and just get a sense for what direction are we headed and what kind of impact can you have to be more efficient with the money that does come in through property taxes, and quite possibly even what are we going to do to stop, it seems like a runaway train. I've been here 25 years and it's feeling like you're getting squeezed out as a resident of Dallas, quite frankly. So.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Property taxes is a huge issue, and it ties into affordable housing because as you've seen and as you're witnessing, you're in your home for decades and decades, and you feel like you're being priced out of your home because property taxes are creeping up and creeping up. And I think that's tackled on 2 fronts. First of all, actually probably 3 fronts. It's tackled with the budget, looking at where there's waste in the budget, where we can cut waste in the budget. And that's bringing in a set of fresh eyes who can look at the budget from an outsider's perspective, understand it, and see where we can cut waste. Then there's efficiencies with with what the operations of the city, where we can capture more of a tax base because of efficiencies. For example, the permitting office. The permitting office has been nothing short of a catastrophe over the past year. Because of that, people have been unable to remodel their homes or expand their homes, and builders have been unable to build homes. And we knew this was a problem before, but it came into sharp focus this past year. It has taken City Council 1 year to figure out that we need a study or need a third party to come in and attempt to solve this problem. This needed to be looked at and fixed within weeks or a month, not a year. And it's been estimated, although we don't know the exact numbers, that the city has lost millions of dollars in tax base on that one inefficiency alone. So it's attacking inefficiencies like that quickly and attacking them well and efficiently. And then finally, it's on the tax side, working to lower taxes and also support small businesses to, again, expand the tax base. Support smart economic development to expand the tax base, so that we then have an adequate tax base that we're working with to supply the things that our city needs, that the city council should be doing without having to increase property taxes. And it's figuring out how we can lower those. Maybe it's with first-time homeowners or with the elderly, but figuring out how to lower property taxes without affecting the tax base of the city.
Thank you. All right, David.
Property taxes. I voted in 2019 to lower the tax rate. I voted in 2020 to lower the tax rate. In the 2020 budget, I also proposed a ceiling that was passed. So I voted 3 times to either reduce or hold the line on property taxes. For over 65 and disabled residents, I have a tax freeze proposal that's been working its way through council. It's been briefed to committee, it's been briefed to council. It's coming back at the end of May, and it's my hope that we'll be able to offer seniors and disabled a freeze on their taxes going forward. We don't have the ability to do it for everybody, but Texas Constitution allows us to do it for seniors and disabled, and I'm going to do it. So tax rates are one part of the puzzle, but the other part we all know is every year the appraisal district goes up. We don't have a lot of power over that, but we do have a little bit of an influence on the split. Right now, I get a little elevator music. Right now, the split on property taxes is roughly 45 residential, 45 commercial, and about 10% business personal property. So it used to be decades ago that commercial was about 60%. So there's a bit of an imbalance of who's paying the property taxes. And I would like to see more transparency, more disclosures, so that we could get back to a little bit more of the burden off of residential property taxes and a little bit more onto the commercial side, because I think that's a little bit more fair. And then I'll also touch on new development. And it's also public safety. It's all interrelated. So in my district, in our district, if you have good public safety, you're going to have more development. And more development is going to be more tax dollars to the city. Last year, we approved in District 14 about $1 billion in new development. That will translate into a lot of new tax revenue for the city. We are the economic engine of the city, and it's incredibly important that we continue to be that engine. So it is bringing in development, and the only way we're going to bring in new development is in safe neighborhoods, safe areas, businesses and people want to live here, new projects, new tax revenue. We'll be able to pay for more of the things that we want, and if we're able to do that, it'll be easier for us to hold the line on the tax rates and maybe even lower them even more, because we're being squeezed out, and I'm sure all of us are out talking to different constituents. We all hear the same story. People are scared. They've been going up 40 to 70% in the last, we had a briefing on it, in the last 3 or 4 years, and they're anticipating going up at least 40% in the next few years too. These are tax increases, backdoor through property value increases that are not sustainable. We are going to have to figure out a way to hold the line and reduce rates, or have some kind of a tax freeze like my proposal.
All right, Mr. Ridley.
Dallas is a victim of its own success when it comes to tax issues. We have been so successful as an attractor of businesses and residences in that people want to move to Dallas, and they bring with them a huge demand for not only residential accommodation but also for office and commercial development. Now, there is only a finite supply of real estate in Dallas in the city limits, and as the demand increases, It's a simple economic formula. The price increases to accompany the increased demand. So what do we do about that? Well, one of the things that we need to do, and this is also basic, simple arithmetic, when we arrive at a budget for the city, we have to weigh what are the real necessities of city infrastructure and maintaining our city services at an acceptable level. At the same time that we cut out fat in the budget, we adopt zero-based budgeting so that we make each department, including the police department, accountable for the results that they achieve each year to justify their budget. In addition to that efficiency, we need to ensure that the tax burden is falling equally on all in Dallas. And that means that we need to address the imbalance between the appraisals of commercial property and residential property. It is a freeload to some extent on commercial properties. The residential areas are paying an unfair burden of our property taxes. But with regard to the equation of how we arrive at the budget, we do need, since we have such an increase in revenues from the increased appraisals, we do need to keep a close watch on our tax rate and adjust it downward to the extent that the revenues are exceeding the necessary services that the city provides. Now, in addition to tax relief, Mr. Blewett refers to his senior tax plan. Well, this is really not going to provide any significant relief for seniors. I looked at the briefing papers from last week, and of the 4 scenarios presented by the finance director, the most aggressive one increased the senior exemption from the current $100,000 to the whopping sum of $108,000, saving seniors $5 a month in taxes. That is not a significant benefit to anyone, and it cuts the city's revenues by millions of dollars. And so I question whether that is a solution looking for a problem.
Thank you. We've passed the halfway point. There's been no scratching, biting, or kicking, so I'm very impressed so far. We're
Do
following
we get
the
to
rules.
correct each other occasionally, or we just have to kind of smile?
Well, that's a good question. That crossed my mind as well. So
I'd just like to make one point on his tax thing.
Yeah,
That
bring
there's a
it.
difference between a tax freeze
okay.
and tax exemptions.
Mhm.
So he's referencing exemptions, which is very different than a tax freeze, and it's in the briefing also.
All right.
That's all.
All right. Do you want to counter?
Counter my counter?
The briefing will speak for itself.
A freeze freezes the amount of taxes that somebody pays today going forward. Exemptions are the exemption that you have on your value, and they're talking about 1%, 3%, 8% increases in the exemptions, which would take it up a marginal amount, and I don't think that's enough. I do think freezing taxes is substantial over time. You won't feel it today, but your taxes, if you're paying 10 grand today, in 10 years, you'll still be paying 10 grand. DISD already has a tax freeze. That's the biggest part of your property tax bill.
Right.
And the city should be doing the same thing.
No. All right. So I'm going to bring it to the next. You know, we often in years past have talked about the Trinity River corridor, and I'm not hearing much about that recently. So is that something worth debating? Is there some? Do you have an opinion on that? And Mr. Blewett, we'll start with you.
I'll smile. 14 years, 27 years, 35 years. We've all been around a little while. The
Yeah.
Trinity has been a fight for a long time. I mean,
Yeah.
it tells you how old we are. Back in the 90s, it feels like that we've been fighting about it. But it is not, when we're going around talking to people, it has not been an issue. It just seems like the citizens have won, people have won, and now I'm not sure what the future of it's going to be, but what they talked about with the toll road and some of those other things, I'm sure we all saw, pictures of jugglers and down in the bottom of the Trinity. I mean, all kinds of funny stuff in D Magazine. I don't hear much about it out there, guys. I mean, I don't see it as a relevant issue anymore, but I do think that we need to be focused more on what the Trinity's going to be, and it's sad that we don't have a better conversation about it, because after the battle was over, it just seems like our attention went somewhere else. And I can tell you, I'm asked more about Fair Park, and what the future of Fair Park is going to be as opposed to the Trinity. And I get more excited about some of the options there. They seem a little closer, things that we can do there. But the Trinity is not something that's been brought up.
Mr. Ridley?
we shouldn't forget the tremendous asset that the Trinity is for our city. The citizens of Dallas fought a hard-fought battle for years, including the 2007 referendum that Angela Hunt promoted. And fortunately, the popular vote prevailed, so that we no longer have the threat of a turnpike running through the floodplain, which was, I thought, a crazy idea to begin with, and therefore I supported Ms. Hunt's referendum on that issue. And so we shouldn't forget what it can be. It now is an afterthought. There is planning underway based upon the $50 million grant that a wealthy philanthropist has blessed the city with to provide a place that allows people to get back to nature and without overdeveloping the Trinity floodway. So I think it has a tremendous potential. We haven't heard much about it lately, and it's kind of slipped from people's minds. But I won't forget about it because it has such a huge potential to not only link the east and west sides of the Trinity, but to provide a place of enjoyment for people who want to get out in nature and have a place for recreation.
Yeah, you know, it's the Trinity River corridor isn't something we've been hearing a lot about recently, but you know, it is important, and especially bridging, as Mr. Ridley said, the east side to the west side, and that's something that I'm very focused on. I've done a lot of work over on the west side of the Trinity River, and that's something that when we're talking about public safety, sometimes we can look at only our district and only our immediate neighborhood and our backyard, but a rising tide raises all ships, and public safety is a big issue on that side of the Trinity River. And it's something I've worked with for many, many years. And so it's not forgetting our neighbors over there and having accessibility over there to work in those neighborhoods to make them safer and make them more accessible.
Thank you. Any commentary on that? We can open it up a little bit.
I feel like we should talk about Canada for some reason. I don't know why you're smiling there.
Well, we're all adorable, so.
Adorable.
Yeah.
Wow.
Robin Williams called Canada a loft over a really good party, so that's why I came down here.
Well, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yes.
All right, so, you know, we are still in the heat of, and it's growing, the social justice movement, and I'm just curious what initiatives that you feel are important to be able to pay attention to right now and to be able to make progress in that area. So who's next? I forget. Is it Mr. Ridley? I think so.
I'll go.
Yeah.
Social justice is a very important issue in Dallas, in all segments of the city. Social justice is a birthright that everyone should be entitled to be treated fairly, equitably, and equally in our society. Unfortunately, the reality is that they aren't. We see many examples of the police over-enforcing drug laws against minorities. We see it in efforts to provide affordable, decent housing for people of all colors and races and creeds. And that is a part of the history of Dallas, for better or worse, and it's something that we need to work more on to improve justice in our society. So how do we go about that? Well, first, we need to reduce the disparity in drug arrests for minorities. The police statistics show that 90% of drug arrests are of minorities, and that's far disproportionate to usage. And so we need to have better training and better rules for the police about how to treat those crimes. And I would advocate that we not prosecute those crimes for possession of marijuana of under 2 ounces. It makes no sense to take our police off the street where they are most effective in keeping the peace and having them spend hours in the police station processing someone's arrest for such a minor offense. And so that is definitely a reform that would save millions of dollars in the police budget and better use it for combating violent crime. And so that is an initiative that we need to start now to communicate that we are going to redress the grievance of minorities in our society who have been plagued with a lack of justice over the years. And it's time that we started addressing that issue.
Thank you.
Yeah, so social justice is a huge issue in Dallas right now. Just this morning, I was on the phone with a board member from One Dallas discussing racial justice and social justice issues. Now, one stat that people don't often talk about is of the 253 murders that we experienced in Dallas in 2020, 218 of those were minority victims. That is a stat we need to start addressing and start taking seriously. And with public safety being my number one issue, that's a stat I will take seriously. Regardless of what the incumbent says, you can go look at his vote, and he took $7 million out of our police overtime budget, and he co-sponsored the amendment to do so. I will not do that because public safety is a huge racial injustice in our city right now. Both of the other two candidates have noted that we live in a more safe district. Well, yes, we do, but that doesn't mean, but it's part of racial justice to understand that just because we live in a safer district, it doesn't mean that others around us aren't suffering, because they are. And then part of the racial justice initiatives and social justice initiatives is supporting small minority-owned businesses. Right now, if there's a theft in a small minority-owned business under $750, that person will not be prosecuted. That needs to change. It takes a lot of merchandise from a small business to reach $750. And that happening day in and day out, or in any sort of regular basis, is crippling to a small business and crippling to a minority-owned small business. So that's something else that I will focus on, is putting pressure on our district attorney to change that policy.
Thank you.
The question is initiatives that we need to be working on. So to Ms. Viney's point about the overtime cut, I mean, we're back to it. Money is money, but what you do with money is more important than what it is. And that $7 million allowed us to implement aspects of the KPMG study, which City Council paid for, well, we voted for, and offered suggestions on how we could get more officers on the street. And we did that. It's called civilianization. We identified 95 people that are sworn officers that were behind desks, and we were able to hire civilians and get 95 sworn officers out onto the street. That's a good use of money, and I'm proud to do that. Now, in reference to initiatives that we should work on, you know, we're downtown, so I'll get a little more granular in terms of where we are. The initiative that I've been working on the most, we call it street racing, speed racing, street takeovers. There's terms for it, but downtown it's unique. Downtown, I've worked with the police department, Public Works, Transportation, Downtown Dallas, Inc., other relevant stakeholders to come up with creative ways to what they call road diets, lane closures, to slow down traffic downtown in an attempt to control the street racing that comes up and down the downtown streets. And they don't go so fast, so it's not really street racing. They rev their engines, and it echoes off the building, and people can't sleep until 3 and 4 in the morning, typically on Sunday nights. But it's a lot. I hear about it. And I've been working with the street racing task force. I've been out with them numerous times. I went out with the helicopter, Air One, to watch how the street racers work, to see how the officers get into their process and how they take over these streets. But if we don't control these racers, and it's not just cars, now it's quads, it's motorcycles. I get videos of just the craziness that's happening downtown. It's disrupting the lives of people who want to live here. We've spent 10, 20 years building our downtown. We have a neighborhood down here. We have a school down here now. We have 700 kids that live down here. This is a neighborhood like any other neighborhood, and they can't sleep. This is an initiative that's incredibly important to me, and it's the use of money on how we're going to address this. It is officers, it's how we put them into dangerous situations, it's how we control traffic down here, it's how we keep the quads and motorcycles off the sidewalks so people can live their lives in peace and we can grow our downtown. Now, you're from Canada. Toronto has an amazing downtown in terms of the vitality, and when I heard how many people lived in their core, 250,000, and here we are, we're at 12,000, We have a long way to go, and the only way we're gonna get there is if we control the chaos up and down our streets. That's how we use our money effectively for public safety.
That was actually a number of the questions that had come in from residents just randomly, and it was the street racing had come up a bunch. So
Yeah,
that's-
downtown is not really street racing, right? I mean, they don't go that fast. We've slowed them down, they're just loud.
I'm going to change the tempo a little bit because arts funding has proved to be downtown pretty effective, and we've seen a real nice growth in arts funding. And how do you see the arts funding impacting? I think you're next.
Sure.
In terms of the role that you would play in terms of how you would grow arts funding, or what you would address that. Is there growth needed there? What's your vision for arts funding in Dallas?
Yeah, absolutely. So the arts in Dallas is one of the things that makes Dallas unique and beautiful. Music and the arts have been an important part of my life. I grew up playing the piano. My sisters, I have 3 of them, are all Suzuki trained violinists. This has been an important part of our life growing up, and it's something that I would focus on continuing here in Dallas, and continuing making it important here in Dallas. And now, yeah, the funding for the arts, you adequately noted that the funding for the arts has been very successful. Dallas has seen a good return on investment in its funding for the arts. So at being on city council, we need to look at these types of fundings as improvement for the city, but also a business deal, right? And arts has proved to be a good business deal for the city. There have been good return on investment there. So with that in mind, I would look to continue that. I would also look to utilize some of our open spaces downtown, potentially Clyde Warren Park, to do things like festivals, invite artists to come and do a stay here, invite artists to come for festivals here as a way to boon the arts in Dallas. And it's no secret that the arts took a hard hit last year, really hard hit in Dallas. So we've got to focus on bringing back the vitality of the arts, because it is a jewel of our city.
Thank you.
I'm a big supporter of the arts in our district for a lot of different reasons. Number one is just the amazing cultural and artistic venues that we have. If you look at the arts district in the 80s versus what it is today, it's remarkable. It's infrastructure. But there's a funding component to it. We've built these things and we haven't maintained them. So funding has been a big problem. I also voted to implement the Connect Plan, which allowed us to expand the boundaries of the arts district so they could perhaps grow more their tax base to help fund what it is they're doing. The Kalita Humphreys Theater is something that I've been a supporter of in trying to renovate it. COVID really did throw a monkey wrench into what we were doing. There was all kinds of funding that was in place, all kinds of excitement that was in place, and it just stopped. So at the city level, I was able to maintain some of their funding and help them as much as I could. The hotel occupancy tax, I voted to give it a higher percentage to the arts community. We didn't get a chance to see that because the HOT is relevant to hotel occupancy, which with COVID went down quite a bit. Other cities like Houston have a much higher percentage of their HOT going to the arts community. It's something that I support because arts is more than just art. It's an attraction that brings people here to rent hotels, to go to dinner, to enjoy our city and spend money and generate tax revenue beyond the actual events of the arts. Arts tourism is something that we promote. It's something that I support. Once we get through this, once we normalize air traffic and we can promote that kind of tourism, it's great for the city, it's great for downtown, and I will be completely supportive of it.
Okay. Sir.
The Arts District and the arts in general in Dallas can be called the heart of our community. It is that because it is the creative engine and the creative outlet for so many of our citizens. Although I was not blessed with any musical talent like Ms. Viney, I have enjoyed season tickets at the Symphony, at the Dallas Theater Center, at Theater 3, and I was a docent serving at the Dallas Museum of Art for a number of years. And so I have a deep appreciation for all forms of art. The issues in Dallas were that we cut back on our maintenance budget for city facilities, particularly our arts venues, going back to the recession in 2008, 2009. And it was never restored. And so we have these jewels of arts buildings, downtown arts venues, that are turning shabby because we're not spending the necessary money to maintain them. And just as with any mechanical or building system, if you don't maintain it, it deteriorates, and you end up paying a lot more to replace important systems that you haven't been maintaining than if you'd been maintaining them all along. So it was really a false economy. I'm an advocate for restoring proper maintenance budgets to the city budget, because the arts is not just the heart of our community, but it's also an economic engine for our city. By that I mean it brings people in from out of town for special art exhibits and concerts. It brings in revenue from people's ancillary activities in staying overnight, in going to restaurants. So we need to treat it as not just an arts organization and a place where creative things happen, but also it is an economic system that the city must provide proper support for in its budget, and I would advocate doing so.
Thank you. The second last question, and it has to do with the city of Dallas as a brand that attracts a corporations moving to Texas. Seems to be almost 100% from California somehow, but there is a opportunity that we have from a tax base to have corporations move here. Yet, when you read the news or updates, you see Frisco winning or you see Plano winning. And so what can we do, what can our brand do to attract more business and have that from a financial standpoint? And I'd like to have your insights on that. So we are, I think, David, you're next.
Okay. One of the buildings that we just passed is going to be a headquarters for someone moving here, and it's kind of a terrible secret. A lot of people know it, but I'm still not going to say the name of the company. But we're going to have a Fortune 500, a Fortune 50 that's going to be in the Uptown area, and we haven't had that for a long time. We have about 115 proposals in the Economic Development Department of the City of Dallas right now, mainly from the West Coast, a lot of California, and we are, quite frankly, behind. We are in a match not just with the big cities like Houston and Austin, but with our surrounding suburbs. They are aggressively selling Dallas. Their brand, and you read it in the papers, companies moving to Dallas area, over and over again, Dallas area. They actually move into Plano, Frisco, Southlake. And we have to realize that our surrounding communities are competing with us, and we're not competing with them enough. Now, I'm a big believer in infrastructure improvements, because if you want to bring a HQ2 to Dallas, and you want to find them a piece of property that they're going to move into and develop, it's a 5-year process. We have to build out the infrastructure. We have to put in sewer, water. We have to get our zoning in place so that it's ready, so that if somebody wants to come here, it's a 2-year process. If we do that, we can bring them in here. So other cities are doing that. Austin is ahead of us a little bit, where they have areas that are ready to go. It's almost turnkey. So they are taking companies from us because we're not ready. We're going to have an infrastructure bond. We're going to have to lay the groundwork so that when these companies say they want to come here, we can provide them a location to do it. Education is a big part of it too. My wife and I have 7 children in Dallas ISD. When Amazon was talking about coming here, one of the things that they said was a negative was educational opportunities. Well, we are a living embodiment of the success of Dallas ISD. I have 2 kids in college, high SAT scores. We've gone all the way through our public schools. It works, and we can sell that. Public transportation is another thing that was harmful for us, that other cities are ahead of us. We are simply going to have to be more aggressive about public transportation if we're going to attract the companies of the future. Another aspect, and you look at the Epic over in the Deep Ellum area, and they started it, and COVID kind of disrupted it a little bit. And it is the concept, the next generation of workers, not companies, but workers, want to be in an urban environment. We need to provide a safe environment that's fun. So as we always say, live, work, play, right? So you can live here, you can work you can walk down the street, get a cup of coffee, go to work, go to a park, enjoy your time we are doing that. We are opening up lots of downtown parks. We are working on public infrastructure. We are working on public transit. We are a ways away though, and we are in the process of creating a public-private corporation that will allow us to incentivize different areas to have the land to bring in some of these companies. So we're moving that direction, but we are behind.
All right. Next.
Dallas has a lot of underutilized resources that could be better utilized to attract out-of-town or out-of-state businesses. Two of them would include downtown itself, and I'll return to that in a moment, and the other is the southern sector, south of I-30. Both are areas where, well, take the example of downtown. We have a lot of underutilized office space. We've had a traditional problem with office buildings sliding down the scale to grade B and even grade C offices, and they've remained idle. Well, fortunately, many of them have been converted to downtown residences, which is why we now have a downtown residence council, because so many people live downtown, and that's fine. But particularly with the impact of COVID, we've seen a lot of businesses retract their leasing. They have attempted to sublease unneeded office space. And the rental rates downtown are very reasonable compared with uptown and other areas of the city and outside of the city for that matter. And yet you have the tremendous resources of downtown in terms of mass transit and access to cultural and other institutions that make it important to do business downtown. I officed downtown for 30 years, and I recognize the importance of that synergy of being at the hub of the city economically. But how do we market that? Well, we need to market our excess office space downtown for use as back office space for other businesses that the front office is in high-priced office space, but they want to be close to the back office. It's also an opportunity for adaptive reuse so that unused space that we don't see a future for office use can be utilized for additional housing. But the important thing is to promote the connection between downtown living and downtown employment. Right now, most of the downtown workers actually live outside of downtown in the Park Cities or elsewhere. And the people who live downtown go outside of downtown to work. That's something that we need to address with more employment for the type of people who live downtown. The other untapped resource is the southern sector. We've paid lip service to this area of town for decades. We need to have a comprehensive economic development plan in this city to establish criteria for when we give economic incentives to employers and what we expect from them in return in terms of number of jobs, in terms of facilities, in underinvested areas like South Dallas. And that also means we have very inexpensive land there that can be marketed to out-of-staters as a prime location for their businesses.
Thank you. Ms. Viney.
Yeah, I'm going to jump off what Mr. Ridley said there, and I think it's two-pronged here, right? It's seeing what land we have to provide for these larger companies who are coming into Dallas, and I agree that utilization of land south of Dallas is an appropriate thing to do, and having an appropriate economic plan there is what we need to work toward. Then secondly, making sure Dallas is a place where people want to live and to bring their families from out of town and to have a business and to expand their business here. We have seen an influx of people from California as well as New York. My understanding is that we had 19% increase of influx of residents from California into Texas in the past year, and I believe it's 22% increase of residents from New York into the DFW North Texas area last year. But we need to make sure that Dallas is where they want to come and where they want to live, not any of the surrounding areas. So I think that is one resident one voter when I was block walking had a perfect way that he analogized this, was getting that word. And he said, it's almost like death by 1,000 cuts. He said, I really want to live inside Dallas and I want to raise my family here. He was like, but But there's the safety issue. It's less safe than it is in some suburbs. He goes, and then I'm paying higher taxes, property taxes, than I would in some suburbs. He goes, and then I drive down the bumpity bump road to get to my home. He's like, and then I send my kids to a DISD school that isn't as good as I'd like it to be. And he said, you know, at what point, Elizabeth, do I hang up my hat and move to the suburbs? And I think that's kind of the calculation that people that are moving into North Texas are making, right? They're looking at all of these things, Dallas versus the suburbs. So I think we need to focus on all of those things. And we've talked a lot about safety and about taxes, but there's also infrastructure and there's education. You know, infrastructure, it's utilizing bond money. First of all, that is already out there. That has not yet been completely utilized. We have bond money sitting out there since 2017 that we need to use to fix our roads and the potholes. Then it's partnering with DISD Board of Trustees, holding them accountable, and improving the quality of our schools. It's looking at this holistically and attacking each one of those such that, like this very astute voter said, it's not death by 1,000 small cuts that then sends companies or residents outside of Dallas.
Thank you.
Repeat the question?
I don't even remember anymore.
I don't think there was
I
a
think we've been
question. I
around.
think it
I'm
just.
like, yeah,
Oh, you started. No,
yeah.
that's
I'm
right.
like, I'll do it again.
We're gonna have some tequila after this, so we'll all sort it out. But let's just close with this. Yes, that's right. You did start. So we're gonna start with Mr. Ridley, and I'd like you to paint a picture in 2 years from now, and I'd like you to talk about what you have accomplished specifically, not from a platitude standpoint, but specifically paint the picture for us, and these are your closing comments. So it is an opportunity for you to have closing comments as well. So paint that picture for us, and a couple years from now, what impact will you have made?
I was trained as an urban planner. Essential to the ability to plan is the ability to have a vision for the future and to thoroughly understand all of the systems and influences and components of our complex urban area, how they work and relate together, and how they can be manipulated to achieve desired ends in terms of the quality of life that we all hope for from our city. With that background, there are several things that I will accomplish and work on during my term of office. First, as I mentioned at the beginning, is affordable housing. We need to address the housing needs of our population that is underhoused or fearful of losing their housing because of the appreciation in their appraised values. That can be addressed through several different means. I mentioned inclusionary zoning. There is a need for incentives for people who can't maintain their existing affordable homes to be able to stay in them. We need to look at private-public partnerships with private developers and the use of our city land bank for building of affordable units. But that's just one aspect of the city. We need to work on our transportation system. DART is in the midst of a consulting assignment to rethink the entire bus system. We have the country's best light rail system, but it doesn't go where a lot of people live and work. And so we need to redesign that bus system to better meet the needs of our citizens. And I will work closely with the DART board to achieve that aim. In addition, we need to protect our neighborhoods from overdevelopment that will reduce the quality of life there such that we no longer attract people who want to live in close-in neighborhoods. That's a tremendous source of potential development in the sense of drawing businesses to District 14 and the entire city of Dallas, is that we have so many desirable neighborhoods to live in. We need to protect the quality of life in those neighborhoods and protect our neighborhood parks from overdevelopment. In addition, I want to take initiatives to develop what the city council has already ordered be done 3 years ago, which was the economic development plan that encompasses the entire city, so that we're no longer giving money away without principle on an ad hoc basis to whatever Fortune 500 company comes to Dallas and says, my hand is out, what are you going to bribe me with? We need to do it on a principled basis, and that's critical. The other thing I want to see is progress on the CCAP, our climate action plan. Its 97 recommendations must be implemented. We must make allowance for those in the budget. It's a long-term plan, but I want to see inroads made in the next 2 years.
Thank you. All right.
All right, well, thank you. Okay, so fast forwarding 2 years, I want to take us back to that voter I was talking to, who was telling me all the different concerns that he had with Dallas. In 2 years, I want to have continued to reach out and speak to that same voter, and that for that voter to think to himself that, okay, wow, these issues that I took my time to tell Elizabeth about, first of all, public safety. He'll be able to see that, wow, instead of every month, we're not breaking records of record high violent crimes, property crimes, murders. He's able to rest a little easier, knowing that hopefully his car won't get broken into that evening. So he'll see that I didn't play politics with his safety, but made it a priority and worked every day on council. And then next, taxes. He'll be able to see that Elizabeth worked to cut where we could cut fat out of the city budget, that she worked for efficiencies within the city budget. He'll be able to see that, for example, permitting. We will tackle that to expand our tax base there. And then infrastructure. That same voter, I hope, and I know in 2 years, should I be elected, will be able to sit back and say, wow, Elizabeth took this seriously. Elizabeth took seriously that these potholes are a problem. That sidewalks downtown, for example, are too narrow. That we need more interconnectedness of sidewalks in downtown to make this area more livable, more workable, and more accessible to people who live here. There's a Dallas Master Sidewalk Plan. I intend to utilize the data as well as the input from people who live here to understand how we can better make our downtown more accessible. And then finally, that same voter will know that I worked with DISD. I will look to improve the educational outcomes of our students in DISD. And so in 2 years, that would be my vision, that the voters who voted for me know what I fought for, and they knew exactly where I stood, because I'll lead with principle and I'll lead with transparency. And I'll heed and be responsive to the concerns of my constituents. You will not be wondering where I am. You will not be wondering why I'm not reaching out to you, because I will. And so I am here not to play politics, but to lead with principle and lead for you. Lead for the city, the residents of District 14 and the city of Dallas. I'm a newcomer to this. I haven't been circling City Hall, waiting for my time to run, because for me, I jumped into this to serve our city. I've served our city for a long time. I'm looking to continue to serve you and our city in public service, and then I will be happy to continue to serve you as your next city council person for District 14.
Thank you, Ms. Viney.
All right, so 2 years from now, I will have voted twice to lower the tax rate for the constituents and residents of Dallas. I will have passed the over 65 tax freeze. I will vote for it, certainly, and I will fight to pass it. I will work very hard to fully staff the 911 call center. Because their civil service, has been very hard to staff them up. We only pay them $14 an hour. We need to raise the pay for them, and we need to get the civil servants to a point where we can get it up to over 100 like it's supposed to be. I will also work at reversing the attrition rate. I will work very hard to make sure that we are losing fewer officers than we are hiring, so that we can, in 2 years, have begun the process to get to the number that we need to get to. It is not just about a budget. It is about all the things I mentioned before. We have to reverse the attrition rate versus the hiring rate. 2 years from now, we will have a plus number on hiring, and we'll get to the numbers that we have to get to, so that when people call 911, they'll have a fully staffed call center, somebody will answer the phone call, and we'll be able to send an officer to respond to that need. That's pretty basic. and we will see that within the next 2 years. I will also more fully implement the District 14 crosswalk plan. If you look around the district, I focus on crosswalks that have been faded, I get them repainted. I've put in a half a dozen plus more of the Hawk flashing crosswalks. I put them in next to libraries, I put them in next to schools, I put them in entertainment areas, because the future of this city is dependent on a walkable, connected city, safely being able to walk around to get to the areas that we want to get to. Schools, recreation centers, library, entertainment areas. We're going to have more flashing crosswalks everywhere I can put them in so we can safely be connected to the things that we want to walk to. This is a vision for the next 2 years that's attainable. I plan on implementing it. I hope to have your vote on May 1st. My name's David Blewett, and I'm the City Councilman for District 14.
Well, on that note, I'd like to thank all three of you for stepping forward, because a lot of people can talk and some people do, and you're stepping forward with your words and actions. And on behalf of the residents of Dallas, we appreciate all of you for stepping forward like this. I'd like to remind everybody that on Monday, the 19th, we will have a second forum. It will be, I'm sure I'll get some feedback and we can improve the model that we went with, and maybe stick with some other stuff that we did as well. But gave us a chance to have some research of our own. This will be archived, and so if you're seeing this, today's date is the 14th of April 2021. So anyway, I'll leave it on that note. We'll see you on Monday. Thank you again for attending, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yay.
Do we clap for ourselves?
That seems
How does this
weird.
work? Yeah.
We're not off camera yet.
I'm still smiling.
We're not-
I
we're not
don't
off
know.
mic yet. Okay.
Now we're done.
Mike's
So
on.